is to reduce and eliminate waste, and waste is in terms not only of material waste, it is in terms of time of the patient, time of the doctor, it's in terms of overproduction, it is in terms of delays, it is in terms of anything which does not add value to the product that you're going to make at the end of it. And our product is a good quality assured report at the end of this line. Also involves a continuous improvement process, which is very important because it is not enough to say, yes, I have achieved and now I'm done with this. It is always being aware that things can go wrong and things can fall short, and it is important to go back and look at how you can continuously improve. Okay, this I like to put up because this was one of the things that we taught in our Henry Ford production system, and it always reminds me of my mother. I don't know if you have parents who have been so perseverant about putting things back where they belong, but that's what it's about essentially. So how do we go about this? Where do we start off? Essentially, these are things that they do not teach us in college. Not teach you, teach me also. Like I never learned this in college. This was all education on the fly. An MBA here is management by walking about. It's not the MBA that you get from a college. So please walk about, ask questions, follow up with getting data. This morning we had some examples of how we can convert our information or our data into knowledge and actionable points. You need to act and then you need to monitor. So that is part of this whole process. So what would be a to-do list in this? It starts off with mapping the workflow cycle. We often know what is happening in the lab in a very general sense, but it's always good to write it down and draw some very simple line diagrams to say what happens inside a lab. Where does the patient come? Where does the sample move after that? Who moves it? How many times is it moved before it reaches the analyzer? How many people have to handle it before it reaches the analyzer? What happens after that? What are the verification processes? What are the reflex processes that happen after that? All these things need to be stated and need to be mapped out so that you avoid all the crossovers and multiple junctions and offering choices to people to do more than one action at a time. Try to reduce those and then your workflow becomes smoother. Reorganizing the lab to suit workflow is a luxury that few of us can afford, and especially when we are in I think in any walk of life, any type of lab, it's not cost effective to keep on remodeling your lab every time. So make sure you do this planning early, or you do it one time so that you get it right or as close to right as possible. Standardization of tasks. Never realized it was so important, but standardization of tasks is really important because then that assures the quality of the product that you put out at the end, and everyone can have this. And you can match your expectations of your clients if you do that. Earlier on, we used to have this problem when we were kind of in the process of automating our coagulation testing. So we'd get this constant feedback that if you send your PT-APTT during the day, it's different from if you send PT-APTT during the night. Or some people would go so far as to say, don't send it after 2 a.m. Like you might as well wait till 8 o'clock and send it later. Standardizing our processes for that. Bringing in the automation and bringing in the SOPs that were needed really helped out. Collect and use data. In a couple of slides, I'll show you what kind of data, just some examples. But everything what Dr. Sujay talked about in the morning is important. We need to look at it. Managing the pre-analytic phase, if at all it's possible. Sometimes we work in labs where we are dependent on others to bring in samples. So managing the pre-analytic phase, because as I mentioned, if you get a bad sample, you get a bad report at the end of it. And keeping the team engaged. This is one of the most challenging parts as in working in a large laboratory, I think, because different people get different rewards, so to speak, from the system. And it's hard to keep people engaged and motivated just by payment alone. So that's very important. Part of the engagement also works when you allow them to make changes in their own workflow and their work areas and to improve. So going back to the team to ask for questions as to what went wrong and how to improve it is one way. Appropriate use of technology. That's very important because for us, especially when things are becoming more technology dependent, is this the right choice? Is this the right product that I need? And various analysis that go around with it. Supply chain management is very important because then your work suffers if you have not thought of that side of it. Using information technology, we had the session during the morning, so I won't touch much on it, except that look at the data that is being collected. There are active data which is being collected, there's passive data which is coming out of the system. Make sure that you use it. Start with very simple dashboards and simple reports, and then you can work your way on to more complex things. Even if you don't have an IT system, if you have a front desk register, that can give you very valuable information at the end of the day. Statistics. Statistics is defined as the way of torturing numbers to tell you what you want them to tell you. But statistics is very important because at different levels, if you own and manage a lab, you really need to know what's happening in your lab. If you don't own and manage a lab and you're answerable to somebody else, then you really need to show that you are producing what is expected of you. And also to, especially when you go back to administration, if you work in systems like us, if you go back to the administration for one extra FTE, or if you're looking at funding an instrument, then you have to show that there is value to what you've been doing so far. So that is one aspect of it. The other aspect is to manage the workflow. This is, for example, we are looking at, when we were looking at how often are slides made, what are the peak hours when blood smears get made, and what are the problems that we had with it. Trying to distribute work and smoothen out work. Some of these graphs like this, administrators like when it keeps climbing up, the number of samples that we are collecting for patients in the hospital. So use simple statistics. It really isn't, you don't have to do huge number crunching to do this. This is very straightforward. An Excel spreadsheet should really help with this. Quality systems. I was a skeptic till I got converted to using our quality systems. We are a late entrant into the NABL domain. I know my colleague, Dr. Sukesh, is the face of for NABL in many areas, but we have become accredited, and I found great value in going through the accreditation process because it has helped us look at our lab very critically. Some of the things that you should use to manage your workflow are key performance indicators that you are already collecting anyway. So utilize the data in whatever form you are collecting it. The results hopefully would be satisfied patients. Doctors, you can't really make the clinicians much happier. Either way, they'll crib. If you shorten the time, they'll want to make it even shorter, or they'll want you to drop prices further. So you really can't satisfy that lot, but they will be happier. Standardized work means your expectations are matched. Doing it right for the first time prevents repeats, and avoid delays, improve turnaround time, and ultimately it translates into saving of costs. So just two short episodes of how we used it. I'm not really going to the detail of how we collected data and did it, but essentially this cycle of being able to take an order and convert it into a report. Earlier, we used to have one main area to run our phlebotomy services. We had about 15 phlebotomists, and they would work between 7 a.m. to 5 p.m. to collect samples. Currently, we run the phlebotomy services for the hospital between 6 a.m. to, this was about 10 years ago. Currently, we run between 6 a.m. to 8 p.m. We run 3 major locations in the hospital, and there are other locations within the hospital that we run for special clinics. We round about 70 wards once a day, and then we do targeted wards for the second time in a day, twice a day. And our services improved substantially. What it took was to work on feedback that we got from the clinicians. They were not happy that the patients had to go away and come back on the next day to give blood. Patients were waiting. So we took the group suggestions, that is both the clinicians and the staff who worked in that area. We planned the work cell as to where the phlebotomists would sit and what are the activities that the phlebotomists needed to do. We rejigged the workflow for them. We brought in a fair bit of pre-analytical automation in terms of online orders for the physicians and online work list for the phlebotomists to work with. And that has substantially reduced the work in terms of dealing with paper. And we have also been able to increase the number of staff because the administration found that the waiting lines would reduce because of this. So we developed software for ourselves. It also provides decision support as to which is the color of tube that needs to be taken and the draw order that should be followed. And this is our major collection area. We have about 23 phlebotomists over here. This is the station that starts in the morning at 6 a.m. and closes at 8 p.m. We have computer stations for each person. They see this, the list of tests to be drawn on the screen. The barcode is generated right down there at the station. This is the point where the patient sits and puts their arm down over there. And this is where the phlebotomist sits to do the collection. So we've kind of made it convenient for the phlebotomist to do the work. The patients are comfortable, and the samples are barcoded before they leave the lab. It's done just in time at the point of collection, which is the best way that you want it to be done. Samples travel through the pneumatic chute. That's the pneumatic chute which you're seeing. It crosses this building and goes to the next building where a lab is, arrives through the chutes, and registration is done right there using a barcode scanner. I think a barcode and a barcode scanner is a highly underestimated tool, especially in the medical domain. And then it goes into one of our labs for processing. The second is about urine analysis. The thing about urine analysis is we were having constant cribs from the clinicians because everything is manual, right? From sample collection, transporting samples, doing the analysis. It was really, we were getting a real hard time with this. Things that changed was we did automation before we did the sample transport business. So automation went through 2 or 3 rounds. We had semi-automated chemistry only with the strips. Then we went on to image-based sediment. And finally, we've settled for the UX systems, which does flow-based sediment and a chemistry both together under one hood. This actually is the one which is now going to, it's a game changer. We just piloted it in a few places within the hospital. This is a tube. It's an evacuated tube for urine. We collect into the usual wide mouth container, and then we use this straw, as it's called, to do the transfer into the evacuated tube. And so some locations actually do this transfer and send us those evacuated tubes with 8 ml of urine into the lab. So we're kind of moving away from the model of manually transporting large number of urine samples, because then it delayed the whole process. So this summarizes what we did in terms of urine analysis. So it was, part of the problem was in our workflow, part of the problem was in what facilities we were providing for ourselves and how we were addressing the issues. So in summary, our workflow management is an important part of running this diagnostic service. And the key aspects includes keeping the team engaged. I have not spent enough time with this, but this is something that we all need to understand and do. Managing your capabilities and your clinicians' expectations, and often rising to the expectations from the clinicians. Often we pathologists are accused of not talking enough to the clinicians. Make opportunities to meet them and find out what they want and how they want and what the problems they face. A responsive quality management system. It's not enough to just put a QMS into place and then sit back and say, I've done it all. It's important to keep looking at it and see how we can improve the systems. Data-driven policies and appropriate technology. This is something that you will come up against, and nobody is immune to this. But if you haven't tried, like our last, one of our former presidents would say, like if you have not made a mistake, that means you haven't really tried something new. So there's always opportunity for mistakes. There's always opportunity to learn something new from it. Thank you very much for your patient listening.